to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Good morning to all our esteemed facilitators, respected teachers, distinguished guests, and my dear students from across India and Phillips School of Education. It is an honor to welcome you all to the inauguration of Discover the World of Economics program. Today, we come together to explore the profound and dynamic world of economics, a discipline that influences every decision we make and holds the key to solving some of the world's most complex challenges. This day marks the beginning of an incredible journey, exploration, and discovery as we delve into the fascinating world of economics. To commence this event with auspiciousness, we will now proceed with the lighting of the lamp ceremony, a symbol of knowledge, wisdom, and enlightenment. During this auspicious moment, Felix Choir will chant a sloka to inspire us and set the tone of the day. We are deeply honored to have with us some of the most esteemed facilitators in the field of economics, Professor Kaushik Basu, Professor Pulin B. Nayak, Professor Nalini Nayak, and Professor Mausumi Das. Thank you to our esteemed professors for gracing this event with your presence. To extend a formal welcome and share her thought, I now invite Ms. Ruma Rohonyogi, Principal of Phillips School of Education, to address us.
Thank you, Principal. A warm good morning to all of you. It's so nice to see so many of you here together. It's really a privilege to have a session like this. We are really happy to have esteemed resource persons, distinguished guests, respected HODs and teachers, and most important, our future generation, our students. I formally welcome all of you here. I know these days will be packed with interest, innovation, and information. It's like a lifetime experience for all of us. And just a note or two about Phillips School. It's the motto of our school where we allow them to dream. Our children dare to dream. And what we do is we make their dreams a reality. Further, it's always told to the children that follow the footprints, but make your own footprints too. That's where they are innovative, they are different, and I think most of the students are like that. Okay, before I continue with a sentence or two, I would request our President Ma'am and our Secretary Ma'am, Dr. Bharati Bakshi Ma'am, and our Secretary Ma'am, Ranjana Singh Gupta, to formally welcome them. Professor Kaushik Basu, sir. He's a renowned Indian economist, currently serving as a professor of economics at Cornell University. He had the key positions as a chief economist of the World Bank and chief economic advisor of the government of India. And most important, he's our mentor. I would request our secretary, ma'am, to please welcome Pulin Nayak, a distinguished economist and former professor of economics at Delhi School of Economics. He is dealing with the welfare economics, public policy, development economics, and he has a lot of research done with. Next, we have Professor Nalini Nayak. Okay, she is a faculty member of PGDAB College, University of Delhi, known for her dedication to teaching and research. Welcome, ma'am. Professor Mausumi is a distinguished economist and professor at Shiv Nadar University with a specialization in macroeconomics, development economics, and economic growth. I welcome them all, and I think you will carry a lot of memories when you go back and a lot of knowledge, information. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, it is my honor to introduce Mr. Sarada Prasad Namhata, Joint Secretary of Journalism and a visionary leader of the Phoenix Innovation Circle.
Thank you. Very good morning to all of you. First to the students who have come all over India, and of course, my dearest Philippines students. Besides that, we have the eminent professors today. We have teachers from different parts of India as well. And of course, my friends, colleagues, mentors, and guides of Nandri. Uh, so essentially I didn't have not prepared any speech or anything, and in fact sometimes it's very difficult for me to talk about non-written or school as I've been asked to do, because there's a big chance I'll get overwhelmed with emotion. In fact, I have joined this family of non-written only 3 years ago. I have joined the family of non-written only 3 years ago, but really it is a wonderful journey that I don't really discuss that, but the chance I get emotional. But as I have to talk a little bit about non-written, hope that all of you have come from outside and a glimpse of our campus, right? But then if we talk about how non-written started, what it started almost 20 years ago, and how the place was. If you want to get a glimpse of it, not exactly, you might sometimes look through that window and look just behind of you. You will see horizon to horizon a barren land. It was even worse than that. Few trees here and there, and some true visionaries inspired by Swami Vivekananda's teaching and personally groomed by Reverend Monk Swami Lakesharananda Ramakrishna, inspired them to come from Kolkata to this barren land. Some of them were renowned doctors, computer scientists, IS officers, and in that barren land, under a few trees, they started a dream. They actually sowed a dream to serve the community, to bring love, passion, and all that requires to build almost across of nation from this corner. They were guided by the principle of Swami Vivekananda that service to man is service to God. We are still lucky, we are still guided by them. Some of them will meet today, Ranjana, Bharatidi, Ashizda, Dr. Ashizda, Shamolda, you'll meet them. So essentially, the whole thing started to a fulfill a service guided by a passion to make a difference in a rural, remote corner. In essentially now, brick by brick, step by step, in that 18, 20 years, you have seen the transformation that happened from that barren land to this place, which is today's Nandri. Nandritam has right now here, you'll get a chance to visit, or if you get a chance, please go around. We have a super specialty eye hospital, 100-bedded super specialty eye hospital that also started from scratch. We have, of course, the Phillips School of Education that started here. I'll give a little other chronology. We have a Krishi Kendra that serves for the livelihood of the locals. Nandita Hospital started around 2008, but before that, they started from a medical camp, weekly medical camp. All these doctors from Kolkata, far away, in 7, 8, 9 hours journey with some water tank on uh, the pickup van. They would come here and start that, and gradually it evolved to a 100-bedded super specialty eye hospital. We serve more than 500,000 patients every year. 15 to 16,000 surgeries happen here. 93% or more than 90% patients get a free treatment from this hospital. Uh, our dreams are always soaring high, but our foot, somebody say, feet are always on the ground because we are very much entrenched in the community because of all objectives is the trying our best with our knowledge and all our efforts to make a difference and working together in the community. Phoenix School of Education started actually 2014, much later, as a kindergarten school with a handful of students. Today, as you can see, it started in a small hub. And today, as you can see, today it is a flourishing CBSE senior secondary school. Ruba ma'am and has described briefly about the school itself. I will not go into detail, but just to show the Felix Fernandrita, the education initiative has, it is Felix School is just not a school. It's a learning center, it's a research center. Here we continuously work, research, academic research, pedagogical research. We perfect them. Scholars like them across the globe comes here. We interact with them, they interact with our students. We go across the globe, across India, and try to bring the best possible quality to this school because we believe that where we are representing rural India, that's actually more than 60% of India. And we believe to convert India from today's, even if you are all economic students, from this so-called middle lower income group, even in economic terms, to a really prosperous India. The rural India is the area where the transformation has to happen. Anyway, so in Phillips School of Education, we put enormous emphasis on all possible global knowledge to bring here so that our children can get the best, our whole area can get inspired, and we can start creating the best leaders for the future. Again, who will be dream high, but who speak will be on this ground, knowing their country, knowing their perspective, how to make those transformations. So in Phillips School of Education, we have practically three. It has evolved in a very interesting way now. We actually, of course, the Phillips School of Education from kindergarten to senior secondary, we have it where we try to give the best education. You can have a tour of our school in 10 years' time where you have come. And of course, you'll be very much welcome to provide your input as well, and as you have the opportunity to mingle with your peers and give your perspective and ideas. And then in time of COVID, we introduced another program called Education for All. The idea of education for all was the success that we have accomplished in this remote corner by bringing quality education and converting and creating great dreams for our children. That learning, to proliferate that learning to the remotest part of India everywhere. So in 3 years journey to the education for all program, where our knowledge, our body of knowledge, our teachers, we leverage their skill, their time, their dedication, and reach out to the remote corners, empowering other teachers at the grassroots. And so far, in 3 years' time, we actually crossed more than 4,000 teachers whom we have empowered successfully, reaching more than 100,000 students at the remotest corner, be it in Ladakh, Meghalaya, Arunachal, of course, in Purulia, Bankura district area, in the uh, in the areas of Sundarban, all the remote areas, we have reached more than 100,000 students, and we are marching very fast. The very last part of our journey in the education wing is this Phyllis Inspiration Circle. What is the objective of Phyllis Inspiration Circle? Just like Phyllis School, as a heart center, as a mothership, is creating education, quality education. One way we are going in education for all to the remotest corner. The other side, we said, we'll create the other way where we will bring the super talented future leaders of different subjects from all over India, and we will try to put this together with our students and start creating future. The Phoenix Inspiration Circle is started actually the first event happened this December, where we actually organized this is the economics one, we organized one mathematics high power workshop, where also not this big, but at least also few students, 10 students, all came from all over India, including our own students, and we did that. Now, of course, you'll hear much more about this economic. Why we're doing it? Because we believe that every level we have to bring this quality education, inspire, aspire, and creating talented people, giving the proper exposure so that they can develop. Because you are the future Indian. So this is idea is that we will not just keep ourselves concentrated in our own location. We'll create opportunity for our students and others to know their peers. So a person from Pune, Bombay, who are studying in schools like Gurgaon or in some city schools, they will make their peer group. They will come to know their friends in Philip school, which is far, far away from universities. If you have seen the map, we are actually the west of West Bengal, right on the border of Jharkhand and West Bengal. Economically, this is the most backward area. So, idea is that we'll create this Phoenix Inspiration Hub, where we will bring students, the future leaders, the talented boys and girls, together under one umbrella, so they can start. Of course, they will learn different things. They'll work together. At the same time, they'll learn each other. They'll learn their country together and build together some network and going forward. So that's the reason for the Felix Inspiration Hub. In your program, now why economics, mathematics? See, the thing is, we started believing that we have other ways of regular courses, regular curriculum. In a metro city, a lot of things happen. All of us, a lot of us aspiring to be STEM oriented. A lot of bright boys are trying to do that. Then you go for the competitive exam, IIT cracking, going abroad, whatever. But that the country cannot grow if the proper research and foundation in the proper topic doesn't happen. We have many IITs, IISs, but we're still missing out in patents, in all good journal articles, and of course, the coveted uh, awards that science and others give. So science is one. So you want to do mathematics, another foundational subject. That kind of foundation start building from the beginning, so our future leaders, if they understand the possibilities, opportunities, and their own responsibility to take this country forward. Economics is another subject, of course. We are lucky to be able to organize such things because, of course, our chief mentor and all the other friends we have allowed us to do such a grandiose of economics workshop. I believe this is one of the first one all over India that anybody has done this kind of school level kind of workshop, bringing students from all over and trying to do this. This is again our experiment. As I said, we dream high and we try to implement that on ground. So economics is of course another important discipline. Science, physics, math, we all know. Economics, whether we believe, whether we do it or recognize or not, we are all kind of under the realm of economics. In our life is economics. Our whatever we are getting served with economic policies. So this is a discipline that is actually absolutely important for future leader, whether it's the policy matters, whether it is mathematical calculation proper done, or whatever. You think about policy, the economic style, if you want to be a market analyst, if you want to be a policy analyst, whatever. So this is a very important discipline that actually, if you grow up in life, you will see that even if you're not an economics student, economics will be required for your progress wherever. We believe that it's important to aspire, inspire our future generation also with the economics part of the game. We have IITs, we have IIScs, we have all the great institutes, but still we have a long way to go. And unless your knowledge, your drive, your passion doesn't integrate the 60% of India who still earns less than $3 per day, country will not go home. That was the idea of bringing you all over here, also giving a glimpse about how the rural India works. We have also, I'm not making a long speech, we have also organized beside the regular classes. On 16th, you'll get a, not big, but you'll get a glimpse of rural India, take you around. That hopefully also inspire you to make a difference. And the network that will create with the Felix friends from other parts together, this 90 odd students, and all of you are very talented, that's why here. I cannot even stop imagining. If this 90 heads, they keep a network, if they work together, and let's say in the next 10 years keep in touch and start engaging, exchanging ideas, and start bringing new thoughts, that would really be the step forward. So enjoy your few days forward. Nothing else to add. I'll hand over that to Professor Basu for starting the whole program. Thank you all and see you around here and enjoy the campus, enjoy the time. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. To formally inaugurate this program, we now begin with our panel discussion, Economic Challenges Confronting the World Today. The session will be led by our distinguished facilitators. Together, they'll unravel critical global issues and spark meaningful conversation. Without further ado, I invite our panelists to begin the session. So, and I also invite the audience to join and ask questions and uh, give your insightful comments.
Let me start with
Yes.
yeah. We have got initial starting of the. Thank you very much. Welcome all of you. I hope the volume is picking up. Welcome all of you to Felix School and this relatively remote part of India. There are many students from here, but there are also students who have gathered here from outside. So, and I'm told that there are also some teachers and some parents who are here. To everybody, a huge welcome. I will not, I have time to give some formal thanks and all, but I won't do that. Don't want to get into the subject matter straight away. Just let me just tell you, it is quite an amazing school. I've been associated now for about 12 years when it was a little thatch hut and a few students. It's grown enormously and it's now beginning to form with different parts of India. What we were planning, this is the first time, as all of you know, is to bring students together from all over India for 4 days of some intense familiarity with the basics of economics. So let me make some opening remarks about the subject. Then we are going to toss in comments, and you all can also jump in. But let me give you the program a little bit more. Economics as Rana, or as was introduced as Sharda Prasad. You discover lots of people have different names, but it's the same individual. Rana was telling you, economics is a very strange subject. There are parts of economics which are almost like mathematics. You take chalk and board or pen and paper or iPad and laptop and work through equations and things like that. I will later on give you a bit of an exposure to that kind of economics. Through some of you would have heard of this. Have you heard of the subject game theory? Yes. So I will give you little examples from game theory, which will give you exposure to economics, which is almost like engineering. You design something with a little bit of mathematics, little bit of algebra, and some of it can be quite exciting. I hope to give you later on, not today, the exposure to that. But there are also other parts of economics which are a part and parcel of everyday life, almost mystical, very difficult to define quite what it is. One of the biggest examples of a mystical object is money, paper money. At one level, it is completely valueless. It's a piece of paper you have in your pocket. The value of the paper comes from the fact that others value it. There's nothing more to it. Otherwise, it's a rupee note is a rupee note, just a piece of paper. But because others value it, you can buy things with it. And others value it because others believe that others value it. Almost a mystical object, money. Economics, part of economics is like that. We will, all of us are very familiar with teaching more senior students in colleges, PhD students, but we will struggle a little bit and try to give you a glimpse of both these kinds of economics, the broader everyday part of life and little examples. I want to just mention one word also about career. Since it is an economics course that you're taking, economics gives you a diverse range of career possibilities after this. So those of you who go into this, one is, of course, you just take a training in economics and go into other kinds of work, whether it is that administration, Indian government, international organization, you get a training in economics, put that to use in finance, in a variety of practical subjects you can do that. The other direction to go with economics is research and teaching. And these things are matters of passion. As you grow up, as you encounter, you will suddenly discover an interest and get hooked on it. I was never planning to become a researcher of economics or a teacher. I was training to be a lawyer. But somewhere along the line, the logic and the puzzles of economics just totally gripped me. And that's what I ended up doing and just enjoyed it, that career in teaching and research. You will have that choice, you will face as you go in. With that, let me give you a bit of a preamble about economics itself. What does it mean? And I want to raise some contemporary challenges and then throw it open to all of these, by the way, they are my colleagues, both sort of students, but colleagues and students. And Pulin, I should just tell you an informal note. When I began my teaching career at the Delhi School of Economics, Pulin, Nayak and I joined the same day, Delhi School of Economics. So it's a long career together at Delhi School. Even before going into economics, one preamble I must tell you, this is the larger thing. Economics is lodged inside philosophy, politics, and other disciplines. We do want to work, develop economic ideas for the country to prosper. At the same time, one reminder I always give is that, we live in a small world. We all share common roots, all human beings, a little kid somewhere in Africa, someone in Latin America, and us. You go back 80,000 years, 100,000 years, we probably have common ancestry. So it's really worth keeping in mind. We are so divisive we've become now that we share a common root, all human beings. And yes, we have gone different ways, but once you remember that, you remember the biggest mission really is for the world as a whole. It's a small world. and we have to strive towards a better world is what we are trying to. We live in a country, we try to help the country, but keeping in mind that the larger mission is the world. I've twice spent time, once in southern Mexico, among a native group over there called Zapotecs. I stayed in the Zapotec family. And once I remember in Gujarat, in Patan district, I stayed for a few days with Ahir families. And after those few days of staying together, in the beginning, they looked totally different. In southern Mexico, I remember we didn't share a language, there was someone helping translate. But after 3 days staying with them, you realize that human beings are fundamentally the same, as so many of our divisions are unnecessary divisions. With that backdrop, into economics. Economics began, and I think Nalini is going to spend a bit more detailed time on this. We treat the start of economics more or less as 1776. Does anyone know who wrote a book in 1776 which became the core of economics? Adam Smith. Adam Smith, who was born in 1723, in 1776 wrote The Wealth of Nations. Adam Smith himself was a fascinating character, a bit of a recluse. At the age of, by the way, important part of his story, nothing to do with economics. At the age of 3, he got kidnapped by some gypsies. So people do speculate if Adam Smith was not rediscovered from the gypsies and brought back home, what would happen to the discipline of economics. But he was such an unusual kid that people have written, serious scholars have written that if he was kept with the gypsies, he would have ruined the lives of the gypsies because he was a very difficult kid, Adam Smith. Adam Smith's big question that he raised is a question that you, though you're in schools, most of you could raise the same question. You look around the world, and the mystifying question is, someone is growing food, huge amounts, that person will not consume. Someone is stitching clothes, lots of clothes, which that person will wear one or two, but stitching lots of clothes. Why are they doing it? At first sight, it may look puzzling. Are these such kind people that they are growing food for other people, stitching clothes for other people? Adam Smith reached an interesting conclusion. In the olden days, this is the first time the big question is being asked, why are people doing things which they will not use? And the conclusion is, they are doing it out of their own interest. They will sell this and then use this to buy what they want. So each person going about in their own little self-interest gives rise to an economy, huge economy, which looks like an organized space where people are working and doing things. That became the idea of the invisible hand. We will come to some of that later on. Then that leads to a big literature from 1776, parallel to Adam Smith, and a friend of his, I'm a great admirer, is the philosopher David Hume. How many of you have heard of David Hume? Just raise your hands. Okay, not too many. So those who didn't raise hands need not feel bad at all. You're in a majority. David Hume was a philosopher and a friend of Adam Smith's, and great thinker, went more into philosophy, and a very noble human being. Many of the ideas actually are born together by both of them, and they come into mainstream economics. One part of economics that I will go into later on is game theory. Game theory is a very modern subject. One of the most important figures over here is, I'm very curious, someone called John Nash. How many of you have heard of the name John Nash? Raise your hands. So lots of people raising hands. How many of you have seen a movie which is his life, John Nash's life? What's it called? You know? The Beautiful Mind. How many of you have seen The Beautiful Mind? There are 2 or 3 hands over there. John Nash is totally different style of economics. He came from pure mathematics and discovered a couple of theorems which give rise to what is called modern day game theory. Some of the simplest ideas of game theories I can explain to you very clearly, I think, and I can also leave you with some open puzzles that even if you're in school, if you are interested in puzzles, you can try to solve, and who knows, if you're lucky, there are many unsolved puzzles that you can go into and maybe toss in your idea into that. A couple of big topics that I want to talk about just now, and then leave it open for us to discuss. Parts of economics which affects all of us and we see all around is inflation and unemployment. Let me tell you a little bit about these topics. I'm doing it very generally right now, only to get a discussion going. You probably all know the meaning of inflation. Inflation is not the rise of price of one product, but generally when overall prices begin to rise, you say that there is inflation. Inflation is a very, very big problem. And this is where you realize the importance of economics as a discipline. No one fully understands what causes inflation. How do you bring it down? The full science of it is not yet worked out, but we have some ideas. To see where we stand, I'll give you one historical episode. Inflation typically, when in India, when you get an inflation of, let us say, right now, inflation is probably at 6%, 5%, or 6%, which means every year, average prices are going up by 5%, 6%. And you know, people whose income is limited do begin to worry. Next year, if all the prices will go up, how will I buy? Inflation in India has gone up earlier. The highest it had reached was in 1973, when it was going at about 30% per annum, which means prices this year, next year, it will be 50% higher. What people forget is, internationally, globally, if you look at history, there have been mega inflations. In the two biggest inflations are 1946 in Hungary, and second biggest inflation is 1923 in Germany. And this inflation is of this level. Something which cost 1 mark, I don't know if the currency that time was mark, 1 mark in Germany. At the end of a year, it would be not 10 marks, not 100 marks, but 1, 0, 0, 0, 23 zeros added. Can you imagine the price rise? So in Germany, what was happening when the inflation was taking place like this, people would take money in a sack. You take the money in a sack and buy a few fruits and things like that, because prices have gone through the roof. And it was devastation. People whose incomes were not rising, they were very badly hit. And 1923, Germany is quite a modern country. 1946, Hungary is a modern country. But we did not understand inflation control fully. And I'll give you a very practical example. I worked in government, advising the Indian government. When inflation was quite high, it was about 10% per annum. 2009, 10, you people were very little, small kids. Inflation was pretty high. I will later on, when I sit down with you in greater details, I will explain. I know people would come very angry. Why doesn't government stop this price rise? Trouble is, once prices begin to rise, whether it's today or 10 years ago, once prices begin to rise, it's not easy. It is not that the Prime Minister can get up and say, stop raising prices. That won't happen. Controlling prices is an art. After Germany's fiasco in 1923 and Hungary's fiasco in 1946, we have gradually learned how to control inflation. Still, it takes time once inflation gets started, and I'll be very happy to, if you raise questions, to discuss some of these things. The other topic, which is a big topic today, let me raise, and then I'm going to set it up for us and for all of you, begin to develop questions that you want to ask. Unemployment. If there is unemployment, what do you do, and why is there so much unemployment in the world? Youth unemployment in India right now is roughly 15% of youngsters are unemployed. And let me explain one thing about the definition of unemployment straight away to you. If you are in school or college, young person who is not looking for a work, you're not counted as unemployed. The way unemployment is counted is, if you're looking for a job and not finding it, then you're unemployed. That being 15% is very, very high. And I was in China very recently. I'm coming from China. In China also, it's very close to India. About 15% is the unemployment rate. All very high. Again, the first reaction of people is, why doesn't the government just create jobs and employ people? The point is, it is not that easy to do it. You can make corrections and you should insist that the government does something, but for the government to act, you do a lot of planning and device. And let me give you one example. You have heard of Manrega, where farmers, especially in rural areas, those who don't have work, what the government has been doing for quite some time is you give people, basically you make them work a little, the work is not very serious, you give them money so that they have at least a minimal amount of money with them. I want to show you, and this logic you should follow, so don't think it's complicated and switch off. I was in government when we were doing this. Go to a village where there is a lot of poverty, you give a certain amount of money to people over there, you employ them, they do some work, you hand over money. One thing which used to worry me a little bit then, which should worry all of you, is when you go to a village and give them money, this village becomes better off. But there is one very interesting thing that happens. When you give money into the hands of people, what do you think will happen to the prices of food items, clothes, etc., when you've given them more money to buy? They will increase because people have got more money. When prices increase, different villages don't have different prices, there is no control. Prices will increase in other villages also because people in this village are buying more. So, when you get money into a group of people in a village, prices rise. What will happen to people in other villages who did not get the money? Will they be better off or worse off? So, this is the kind of thing you have to be worried about. You may directly solve the problem of this village, but in a moneyed economy, when you solve this problem, you create a problem in another village, which could be far away, no connection with this village. They will just sense that the prices are beginning to rise. Why? Because you've injected money into this village. So solving many of these problems are very complicated. Unemployment is one of them. Today, with the rise of machinery, there is gradually a drop in the demand for labor. This is happening most acutely in rich countries because wages are high and big firms and corporations are not using that much labor. In America, for instance, ordinary working classes are very angry because they are beginning to lose their jobs to two things. One is by the use of machines, people are being dislodged, machines are doing your job. But also, because of digital connectivity, some of the work is being done from in Bangalore, in Manila, in other countries in the world where labor is cheaper. They are using the digital connectivity and working for an American corporation, outsourcing. This is causing a lot of problems. And let me give you an example why even for United States it's very difficult to solve. There is a big UN cry, and from 20th January in America, who knows what will happen to policy? You know what's happening on 20th January. Trump is going to get into office, there will be lots of policy changes. Many in America are saying that America should not send work to Bangalore and other places in India. Outsourcing should be stopped. If outsourcing stops, what will happen is American production costs will go up because they'll have to use their own labor much more expensive. If American production cost goes up, the final product that America produces, America may not be able to compete in the international market because if Germany uses the cheaper labor elsewhere in the world, China uses it, America does not. America will get outcompeted. So the American problem is also not an easy problem. You can't just block other countries and say we will do it. Lots of challenges, the employment challenge and the inflation challenge in particular. If you all have questions, comments, hold on to them. But I was going to now turn over to the other three of my teacher colleagues for this time, and also Priyanka, Ranjana, Rana, if you all want to jump in as we get into the discussion, all will come in. So any of you want to go in first and make some comments and keep this off? Pulin? Okay, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Thank you, Kaushik, for that. Thanks to Ranjana, Bharati, Rana, many others, I'm talking of names, for bringing us here. And I was here last year as well, along with Nalini, and it's great to be back again. So I'll be very brief. I think Kaushik has already given a very broad overview of the kind of things that you might expect. I'm audible to everyone, right? You can hear me at the end? Okay. Take it all. So, the first thing that came to my mind when I sort of came into this room is I wanted to check with you. How many of you are so keen about economics that you may wish to pursue it as a career, possibly in business and banking and teaching, etc.? Is it a very large? Okay, that's very good to see. So you're all very keen about the subject. Uh, uh, there are enormous possibilities in academics, in teaching, research, in the government, in banking, commerce, and so justifiably your interest is well placed and all get jobs, etc. But you know, at the time that I was in school, like you, uh, economics was not a subject that was offered for study. If I remember right, it was not offered in any of the sort of at school level sort of studies in India or even in Europe. It has come about much later. And one might want to know why that was the case. I mean, in school, I've been doing the usual subjects, like English, Bengali, or Hindi, or whatever, history, geography. If you were science minded, you did physics, chemistry, biology, etc. But economics was not there. And it was not there possibly because I think, as I myself sort of thought about it, it's probably a subject that begins to emerge in your own minds after you gain a certain degree of maturity. Whereas some of the other subjects that I just mentioned, mathematics and so forth, these come naturally out of the curiosity of a young and growing mind. So, uh, the first thing is the subject is an unusual kind of subject. Uh, it's often thought to be the mother of social sciences. It's, of course, it's a subject that links with philosophy, moral philosophy as well, ethics. Um, in fact, economics has been for a long period part of the moral science tripos in many of the Western universities, Cambridge in particular. So, what is it about economics that makes it a fascinating kind of subject? And the thing is, economics is about the day-to-day activities of human beings, and the day-to-day activities as agriculturists or workers in industry, or producers who are manufacturing goods, and of course consumers, people who are consuming goods, the housewife purchasing goods to run a family. Economics talks about all of this. All of these things tend to come into the mind of a person who has come about to a certain degree of maturity in life. And that's why possibly economics becomes interesting as we go along. Now, it also also so happens that this is a subject that has a certain degree of rootedness in some core, shall we say, principles, which can also be studied in a mathematical sort of context. Uh, the notion of maximization, maximizing a certain particular objective, and the idea of maximizing something subject to certain constraints. This is inherent in economics and it's inherent in engineering and certain other subjects. Now, in fact, a great name in economics of the 20th century was Paul Samuelson. Many of you might have come across this name. Samuelson was the second, the Nobel Prize in Economics was instituted in the year 1969, if I remember right. And the first recipients of the Nobel Prize in Economics were two people, Tim Bergen and Frisch, Europeans. And the second year this prize was given, the recipient was Paul Samuelson. He was possibly the greatest economist the world saw after two or three other names, John Maynard Keynes and Schumpeter. So, and Samuelson comes generationally after these two names. And in the latter half of the 20th century, he would use a big name. In his Nobel acceptance speech, this is what Samuelson talks about economics as being a subject that is about looking at certain maximizing principles, either maximizing or minimizing principles. If you're a producer, you want to minimize costs. Okay? And the idea of maximizing utility or satisfaction or happiness for consumers and the idea of minimizing costs for a producer, these are notions that can be subject to certain formal reasonings, mathematical reasonings in particular. So this is a subject that talks about this kind of mathematical principles, but it also has the idea of meeting human needs. It is also a subject that talks about the idea of distributive justice. Economics is a subject that talks about some people being very rich, some others being very poor. And the lack of ethical sort of justification for a world in which some people are very rich and some are very poor. I mean, if we look at the Indian society, the richest 1% in India take account of almost 25% of the GDP, gross domestic product. That's a huge amount of money. And this makes India one of the most distributionally sort of wrong kind of countries to have. Very high and very skewed distribution of it. There are many other countries which share this. Mexico is one example. South Africa is one example. Mexico to some extent, South Africa, and India also. Now, economics is a subject that deals with this particular issue, in addition to inflation and unemployment that Kaushik talked about. Economics also talks about how we come to a situation where the distribution of income becomes highly skewed. Some people are very rich, some are extremely poor. Here I think the best example is our own country. And economics, therefore, is a subject that goes to the heart of how we should be thinking in terms of ordering our society. And is there a way in which we can think in terms of increasing the income levels of the bottom sections of the population. Now, it so happens that in looking at this issue of inequality, economics is just one subject that deals with it. There are other social sciences that also deal with it. Sociology, for example, also deals with this. There is a caste hierarchy, and for a variety of reasons, some castes have been at the top end, some castes have been at the bottom end. So low that we have had untouchability as part of our terrible sort of long history. And it continues to exist in certain parts of the country. Now, income inequality is an economic phenomenon, of course, but it is also a sociological phenomenon. It is also a historical phenomenon. So, when we look at the subject economics, it looks at, on the one hand, certain broad mathematical principles, but it comes to the notion of morality and ethics, and it also looks at history and sociology. That's what makes economics the kind of subject it is. And of course, it is a subject that deals with very practical kind of issues, the practical issues of banking, money supply, money creation, how much money people have in their pockets and so on. That is what the subject economics is all about. And the greatest practitioners of the subject economics were people who looked at the subject in a broad, holistic kind of perspective. And that is what gives the subject the strength and the uniqueness that economics is all about. So I thought I'll just give a brief statement, and then of course we'll look at questions and so forth from all of you. Take it on.
Okay, thank you very much, Ranjana, Ananda, and Felix School, everybody. This is my first time in the Felix School, but I want to share with you that this is not the first time that I've been to Purulia. I have spent 5 years from class 3 to class 7 in one of the Purulia school in it's called Shantamani Girls High School. So in a way, coming back here, it's sort of completes that circle for me. Uh, I'm going to talk about more formally about the problems that I think are important for economics and for you to sort of understand and probably delve deeper going forward. But I want to relate those problems to actually something that you guys are experiencing and I had experienced when I was a student in one of these small town away from Kolkata, and that is about quality of education and the inequality in the quality of education across different regions, different uh, countries, states, and so on. And that is very much related to the overall economic problems of economics that Kaushik and Pulin were talking about in terms of inequality at the income level. But if you think about the inequality being calculated over generations, then you're thinking how to raise inequality our parents in rich or poor calculates into you guys going forward, being able to access opportunities and all. And that for us as a society and as an economist and for you also thinking about future is probably the biggest problem, the intergenerational transmission of inequality, which happens if you do not have access to quality education. So in some sense to me, that's an important problem. And I'll just tell you what, I've been, I went to sort of, I have been a part of a government institution until recently. I have been educated in government institutions, educational institutions, and I'll give a perspective about in my view, the problem, this particular problem of equal access to opportunity for the younger generation, to my mind is becoming sort of more and more acute. And to my mind, that's related to the overall growth process that we are experiencing. Right? It's kind of, other part, the darker part of the story. And I'm going to elaborate more on this when I talk to you later in my lecture. But just to give you a, brief overview about why, where the problem lies, it's just I can compare my life with life of your generation, sitting in Purulia, let's say. When I was in Purulia, sometime in 1980s, there were not many private schools. There were mostly, or if there are private schools, character-wise, they were pretty much the same as the government schools. But they have many good teachers because there was no private universities, private educational institutions were so rare that these teachers, many of them were educated in Kolkata, very good quality teachers came back to their hometown, home village, and so on, and started teaching. Teaching used to be one of the more high status quote unquote profession, and many people came back from there. So the kind of quality of teaching that I received in Chandramayee Girls High School from +5 to +7, and even before that was even later when I went to Kolkata was really no different from all the students who were coming from more elite schools in Kolkata. I think that particular thing has changed over the years. To my mind, when I go to, I've been teaching in the School of Economics in the MA level since 2000, and only recently I've been to, I've joined Vishnada University, which is a private university, only last July. Again, I see that stark difference. When I started teaching in the School of Economics, students were coming from all across India from a varied background. Over the last 20 years, I saw that gradually the kind of students that we were getting in the School of Economics, and remember the School of Economics is one of the top public institutions for teaching MA. So that kind of students is becoming more and more skewed. We are getting more students mostly from Delhi, some from Calcutta, Bombay, hardly anybody from relatively remote areas, which was more the case when I was a student there. And now that I'm part of a private university, a fantastic private university in terms of its quality of teaching and infrastructure. But when I look at the student profile, it's mostly elite students coming from elite schools. So that to me is a stark inequality, which I think is going to translate into inequality of opportunity for this generation going forward. And why do I say that it's related to the growth process? That brings me back to the issue that we talked about, which is that if currently, 25% of the national income goes to top 1%, then that leaves very little room for the, the bottom 50%, let us say, to manage their life, do their day-to-day business, and also send their children to school. More so if the schools, public schools are not good enough and you have to spend money to send your children to private schools. And that's where, as I say, percolation of inequality, persistence of inequality across generation really shows up. Because the growth process has become such, because of various reasons, the growth process has become such that income and productivity are being generated by people who are very highly skilled. And unless you go up to that level, either in terms of, as Pulin was talking about, either you become an engineer or a manager or a banker and so on, that's where the jobs lie. And that's where also the highest productivity is happening. So unless you can go up there, you are not getting enough return for yourself, and you are also not contributing enough. So imagine somebody who is sort of, stuck in Korea, haven't had opportunity to get a quality of education, did not really get into a good job, maybe opened a small shop somewhere. That's not really neither contributing much to the overall income, nor to his personal income. So if the next generation of that person also is stuck in Korea with the same kind of education, that's exactly where the unfairness, the inequality really begins to bite over the long run. So to my mind, that probably is something that all of us should think about. And to my mind, when I think about the overall society, especially for our country, that probably is probably the main part of the education sector. That probably what bothers me the most. How actual income inequality is also generating unequal opportunity, which is going to create future inequality. So I want to hear more from you. Many of you who are here are probably, not in this situation. Definitely students in this school are getting fantastic education opportunities. But remember, that's such a small pocket. We need more of this. We need other stuff or other people to do. And what can be done about it is really the big question that I think as an economist and as a policymaker, all of us should think about. And I'm just, throwing open these ideas. I can see that my world and your world scenario has changed drastically. And how can I bring your generation back to a scenario what are the things that we can do as an individual, what are the things that the government can do as a policy, and what are the things that civil society and let's say NGOs can do. Is something that I think it's open for discussion. I'd love to hear your ideas about that, your perspective about that. What are the things that you see sitting over there, which can take you over there? What are the challenges that you face in sort of, in this kind of a society where opportunities are not necessarily equally distributed? Is something that I'd love to hear from you. I just stop here because I really want your perspective on this and try to get back at my experience when I was just like the same town.
Thank you, Nalini, for inviting us. And well, all of you for coming here. And well, hopefully we will be giving something to take back with you. Uh, my, I want to think about economics, the subject. I have always, I taught many years ago. I have been teaching for many years now. Uh, but I taught microeconomic theory. But also I taught a subject, uh, one part of economics, uh, which was a part of the economics course in Cornell University. It was economic systems. Now, uh, economics, as Kaushik said, as Pulin said, is a very vast subject. It's it has one end of it is very formal. It's very precise, mathematical. Theorems, people are solving theorems and getting results just like mathematicians. But economics also is a social science. It deals with the problems of society. And because it deals with the problems of society, economics also has it sort of blends into and shares space with economic history. You can't understand what is happening today in our society, in the economic world around us, unless you have a perspective on what happened before. What was India like? What was Indian? What was the Indian economy like? What was the world economy like? Say 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 200 years ago. What was it like? What was happening? Where did we stand? How did the world, how did the economy function? So, economic history is a very, very important part of economics to understand the present, to know what is happening today and why things are the way they are. Also, as Pulin said, sociology, ethics, all of these, morality, all of these are part and parcel of philosophy, basically philosophy, say. All of it is part and parcel of getting a holistic picture of what economics as a subject is. So, in fact, if you go back to economic thought, one part of history is just knowing how the economy functioned, how was manufacturing done, how was the distribution of goods done. There weren't Can you imagine there was a world in which there were small producers, village communities, where production was done for the village and the distribution happened within the village. Because transportation was not, you didn't have the kind of modern transportation that you have. So people lived within one community and there were links, there was trade, there were links with other communities, but it was limited. Uh, there were trade links, of course, even with other countries. You can see that in the history of seafaring communities in the coastal regions, in Odisha, for example, and in the west coast, Gujarat, and all. But uh, the majority of people live within their community, their economic links were within the community, right? So, knowing all of that, over time things change. So, economic history, one part of it is simply knowing how manufacturing happened, how distribution happened, all the things that we talk about in economics. There's another part of economics which is, of economics as a social science, uh, the history of economic thought. How did thought, how did the thinking about economics develop? That is a very major part of economics, where people study the development of economic ideas. Because over time, as societies changed, as the world changed, thinking about economics also changed. Thinking about how things should be done, that also changed. So that is also a very important part of economics. So that's just basically to give you an idea about how vast the subject of economics is. It's not just uh, about formal models. That's there. That's a very, in fact, I think in present day economics, that is the more important part of economics. But in an earlier era, it would have been economic thought, economic history. Those are also equally important parts of economics. So if you choose to become an economist, you have this large, it's actually a range of ideas and ways of practicing economics that you can engage in. I hope some of it will come across.
So we will throw it open to discussion. So begin to prepare your questions and thoughts. One suggestion which came to me from Ranjana earlier is we will make you all participate in a particular way. I want to explain this. I should tell you that I've been tangentially involved in the organization of this. Mausumi and Ranjana played a major role, and the non-Britam community that consists of there is Priyanka who spoke to you, Ruma, the principal who spoke to you, Rana, and there's Bharati over there. Whole bunch of people have played a very important role, and as you spend the next few days here, you'll meet a lot of the people who run this absolutely amazing outfit over here. One plan that we had earlier is to involve you all in one particular way. And Ramana, Priyanka, we will have to somehow work it out. We will form groups, break you all up into groups over the next 3 days, especially the visit on the 16th, where you will go and do some field work. After that, we will want to have panel presentations. So if we form groups of say 10 students together, you will come up on stage and tell us a little bit about your experience, what you saw. Also, any thoughts on economics? So we will give you some time for the group to sit down together, plan how you will speak, what you will present, right? We will leave it at that. So wanted to tell you that, and we will, I suppose, again, Mausumi, Rangana, whoever, you will somehow to form the groups as to and let them know.
We will do it, we will send them the question,
Yeah.
have to get them ready, how to.
Yeah, we can, yeah, give you some sample questions of the kind of things that you will try to answer, then you'll have to work into some of that. So let me now open it up. I actually on the inequality, I'm glad Pulin brought up, everybody brought up the question of inequality. Inequality, really, I do feel it's sky high. It's an unacceptably high level. The global inequality and even inequality in India, it's at a shocking level. We need to put thought about it, that why is it reaching a level which is so intolerable and what can be done about it. So I'm hoping that we will get some time to talk about it. And you should remember that this should be a matter of concern, really, no matter where you are. Historically, some very well-off people, Karl Marx's collaborator Engels was an entrepreneur, made a lot of money, but he used to feel that it's wrong to have a system where I make so much and others do so little. So he worked towards some kind of an idea to create a fairer world. It's not easy, but it's something that we should spend some time thinking about. So let me throw it open now. Do you all want to jump in with some comments? You can do that. Rana, do you want the practical one? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is the question of the impact of economic development on the environment, which is such a
Yeah.
major and current issue.
Yeah.
I think that is
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we've got 4 days, so we will get into many things. I've got lots of plans of topics, but what Nalini is pointing out is true. Sustainability. I mean, you don't want to live life in a way that the next generation is going to be impoverished and have hardly anything for themselves. So Greta Thunberg, a whole lot of people have been activists in that. I hope we will have occasion over these 4 days to get into that. Rather from the world of practice, if you want to do any thoughts.
Carry on. We'll probably make comments later.
Why don't I'm just presenting it in a free floating way. Bring up some questions or comments that you had, and since you have all the teachers over here, sorts of things that you want us to address. You know, it's such a big subject. We all have our specialization. So you may have questions which none of us will have an answer for. But you can raise the questions, which we do know within the next 4 days, we will bring them up. Also, if you already have some thoughts from a career in economics to India's problems to global problems, get up, introduce yourself, give your name, and toss in the questions. We would like to also gradually, I'm hoping over the next 4 days, you will get to know your names. I've got a very bad memory for names, but I would love to know as many of you as possible. So get up and feel free. I know many of the students from Phoenix School, I know many of them over here, but anyone, Phoenix School, otherwise, raise your hand, ask a question, toss in a comment. Yes, okay, let's go there and yeah.
Mention is.
I get it there on my eyes, but yeah, that's fine, yes. It is.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Devanshi Pagaya from Calcutta International School, Kolkata. So, as you talked about inflation, sir, I have a question that why in India, if we have that inflation, then many of the people are below the poverty line. So, when there's inflation, the government really needs to focus on the social and economic welfare of the people, and they need to spend a lot of money on it. Whereas if you see the developed nations, they don't have people mostly below the poverty line. So they put a curve on the spending of the government. So how do you think India would tackle this issue? Because they have a lot of spending when it comes to managing people who are below the poverty line during inflation.
Yeah, so I'm summing up a little bit of your question. What's your name?
Devanshi.
Devanshi. So tell me if I'm paraphrasing your question right, that given that in India there are lots of people below the poverty line, That is indeed true. It's a shocking number still. And inflation, when it hits them, they have virtually nothing to be able to combat that. So what should the government do?
Yes, sir. Compared to other countries, they
Yeah.
have a huge amount of saving. So how, as it is inflation, we spend a lot. So how, what does the
What should we
government?
do? Yeah. So Mausumi was once my student, so I could insist that she gives the answer. I'm joking. Why not? Yeah. Maybe I want to sit there so we can. That's right. Oh, I can stay. Oh, now that's it. Mostly, you want to, I think, whoever wants to jump in on what you do. Pulin, my inequality related also.
But the first thing I'd like to say is that it's true that in the Indian context, the situation is particularly tough, no question about it. To begin with, our per capita income is very low. So we are at about somewhere around $2,600 per person per annum. Which is in a listing of say 190 countries or so. Our number is somewhere around 130 to 135. We're as low as that, not in the top 100. And so the average level is very low, and then because of the skewness, inequality, the bottom sections are particularly up, and bottom sections go below the top. You're absolutely right about it. So the government can do certain things, but one of the key things that the government needs to think of are two. Education, which mostly talked about earlier, and health. Now, it so happens that in the Indian context, in recent years, somehow there is reason to believe that the government has not done adequately in terms of education. Because if these two things are sort of adequately provided for, that gives a cushion to everyone, and in particular the bottom sections. So, for a variety of reasons, a lot of withdrawal of the government, both from the public education system as well as the health system. Of course, five-star hospitals are coming up, etc., but they're completely unaffordable for the bottom section. So the government has to, bolster. Uh, these are two points which are often called merit goods, education and health. These are goods which ought to be provided for by the government's budgetary process. Now, India spends on health something like just 1.3% of GDP on public expenditure on health. It is one of the lowest percentages in the entire world. Western Europe is in the range of about 8 to 12%. The US, which is a private sector driven economy, that's more like 18% of GDP. India is at 1.3%. China is around 3.5% of their. So almost every other country, every other major country is spending much more by way of public expenditure on health. India needs to do much more, not withdraw, but to put in much more. All of that is going to help the bottom section of the population. If there's an illness in a below the poverty line family, they can go to the government hospitals. But in addition to that, certain other safety nets by way of certain kinds of those cheaper grains and so on. To some extent we do it, but it's not enough. Now, one more thing I'll say. It is not right to think that other countries, particularly in Europe, are free of this difficulty. There is a poverty population in most countries as well. Even in the US of A, there are people who are at a very low level of, in relation to the expected living standards, because people have to spend money on basic transportation, on utilities, those are older countries and so forth. And there's a sizable section of the population which falls below the minimum. The problem of poverty is a real one in Western Europe and North America. Also, the percentages may be growing. And to add to the fact that with artificial intelligence and so forth, there is a fair section of the population going without jobs now, going to the economy. They are finding things very difficult. So it's a complex issue, but certainly in the Indian context, much more needs to be done.
I want to add in one more thing. I personally believe, that the super rich should be taxed more, not to give it to the hands of the government for politicians to spend, but which is a transfer to the poor. Because lots of people argue for greater equality, but to the poor and bottom end, it's my belief. This is not right or wrong because there's no, of course, you can prove this is just a position. And I'll tell you what, inequality, people very often, those who believe in complete free market, say if you work hard, you make a lot. But most of the inequality in India is at birth. Some people are born with virtually nothing. Some people are born super rich because they inherit. Even in America, there is inheritance tax. They cut off a little bit of this thing. I feel there should be an inheritance tax and there's a transfer so that this inequality at the start of life should be mitigated. You have anything? Yeah.
Yeah, just want to add that in the developed countries, in fact, be surprised that uh, public education is there. In fact, look at societies like the UK, in Europe, in the European countries, there's public education which is virtually free and of very good quality. Something that Mausumi was talking about. Also, health. That what Pulin was saying, there's a very substantial spending on public health facilities. So these are things which are provided to the population and which people in India do not get. In fact, we need to spend more. We don't need to spend less. There is, because of our poverty, we need more of that, not less. If you look at a country like China, we think of China as a miracle economy. India and China were equally poor, but China, you know, and China went through communism, a very severe form of communism in the time of Mao Zedong. Later on, Deng Xiaoping took over, the economy opened up, liberalization and so forth, and we developed at very fast pace. But one of the things which happened in China during the Maoist period was that they took care of basics, health, education for everyone. So if you look at the parameters on which we look at these things, infant mortality, life expectancy, and what else? Education. Now, China was, they had from a very poor country, they had managed to get 99% literacy. We still don't have that. We still do not have 99% literacy. Our literacy levels are what?
73%.
Yeah. And that too, the quality is something which is very, very doubtful. And basic health was there in China during the Maoist period. That is something that they achieved.
Public for all.
Well, those are very deep questions which
I do believe it should be made available to all. Till it happens, you have to rely on Phoenix School.
Thank you. Naomi, you had a question?
So many.
Oh, many questions. So where is the?
Yeah,
mic?
yeah.
I'll
Yeah,
take,
go
I'll
ahead.
take the mic. Straight to the-
Yeah.
So I'm Shomini Kundu from Grade 10, and of course this one is a presentation. So my question was, as and everyone talked about inflation, so inflation affects the economic balance of any country. So India is a developing country, and also there are few developed countries. So like inflation is mostly affect, like which country will be more affected by inflation? The developing countries or the already developed countries?
I can, start up a little bit and leave it to others. It's a bit of a difficult question. One thing, first of all, you must realize, inflation across countries does not happen at the same level. So you can sit down. One country can be having a much faster inflation when another is having a slower. But nowadays, with money flowing from one to the other, inflation does cross boundaries of countries. But I think it's a bit related to what we were discussing earlier. The bigger concern is for poorer countries. And as Pulin pointed out, in the world chart, India still per capita income, we are very low down in the world. So for us, it's a much bigger concern because there's a large fraction of part of the population that finds it very, very difficult to handle. Yeah, there were lots of other questions. I don't know how we will. We are talking. Yeah.
I'll just go back
Yes,
and then.
it's Priyanka is going to be the
Yes,
authority.
thank you. I'll come.
Could you come here to ask the question?
Yeah, maybe a friend.
No, Priyanka.
Okay, for the,
Okay, this one.
just take the call from here.
I'm from the Bangladesh for Girls in Computer. So I have a question regarding the inequality in the field of education. The problem of differentiation between the elite schools and the public schools is also sort of related to the social status symbol problem in India and resides in the mind of the people. So how to tackle this issue effectively and also how to improve the infrastructure of public schools where in India a person is considered literate if he or she can write or read a simple passage with understanding in any language. How to tackle this issue effectively?
Oh, okay, so I think I'll start off and then others can join. So I think it's a real problem in the sense that it's an education policy and related to the economics, of course. But I think the status symbol, as I was relating to my own experience, was not really there earlier, and it has something to do with the quality. So the reason why the private schools, the elite schools have become such a status symbol is partly because they charge a higher fee and therefore they get support to employ better teachers. And that then eventually the quality of teachers shows up in many different ways, and that's when it becomes a status symbol that basically those schools are good schools. And then in some sense, so the entry barrier is a huge entry barrier is not to realize it's purely economic. I might be the most talented kid in this neighborhood, but I will not necessarily get admission in the Madama Junior College my parents pay. Now, typically in other societies, sometimes some other institutions will come in, market institutions like banks and so on. Again, the problem with a country like ours is that those kind of supporting institutions, which are market based, do not always operate. And therefore, there's a huge role for the government here compared to many other countries where the market works better in the sense that you get admission in one of those elite institutions, quality education, you can just take a loan and go there. That sort of mitigates this access or equal opportunities. Because of the absence of that, starter in countries like ours and other developing countries, it's a bigger problem. And therefore, it's not up to my mind, it's not really status so much. I think it's more to do with the quality. And we do not have any more good public school for whatever reason, partly because of the resource crunch that in the government is, as Pulin was saying, very few, only a little proportion coming back to public education from the government. That is huge. I believe it's at some level is going to bite us, all of us, not just the poor.
Well, I thought so exciting discussion. I'll just join with. But as you thought, I'm not getting exactly that we have the next 3 days excellent discussion about the policy, the government perspective, issues, and all. This morning, I think one thing we all talked about inequality. That is a given thing, right? In fact, just a quick personal one. The fact that I am today in Nandrism is a question that haunted me. So after 3.5 decades abroad in Europe, anyways, I came back and I found home. Is exactly that question. We have the best institution, everything, but we are still, our GDP per capita is so low. If you see the inequality index at 1%, 10%, 50%, you will see really that is a serious issue. And then, of course, the policies and etc., what can be done short term and etc. One area we thought maybe that what we can do, because I always use two words very often, subject and citizen. Are you a subject or you're a citizen? So and that's if you're a citizen, then you just do not only say who should do what and all, what can you do? And that exactly is Nalini's principles. In a barren land, Nalini started thinking what we can do. So that's why at Philip School, we believe the quality education to make that difference, as Mausumi mentioned, quality education to create the real productive for the future in today's world, a productive nation. So we said, okay, what can we do in quality education? Philip School is an example. In a remote corner, we started the best of the best quality education to provide. And then, as I mentioned, we take a stake of calling it in a very limited scope. It's not even a drop in the ocean, fraction in the drop in the ocean. Education for all program, where we're trying to take this quality education, most we mentioned what NGOs can do, and etc. That is our humble effort. Take this quality education across to the. You will see some examples of those schools, on your 16, to take the education to them. Because if you have seen the reports of Pratham, ASER report of Education of India, the primary or foundational literacy numeracy reports, you will see the staggering gap. The inequality gap that you see in the economy is essentially reflected in the education, the same vicious cycle dimension. So in our own way, we are doing little. I hope all of you, as you learn more, get into the policies, etc., of course we'll do, but at the same time, we'll also do what we can do in the small scale to make a difference. Yeah.
There were lots of hands.
So I'm Absin Sajesh from Belgaum High, Pulin. And as we're talking about the income inequalities and the redistribution of wealth, I had this doubt and I wanted to know your opinion. Does a command economy do a better job in redistributing income or wealth than a free market or a mixed economy?
There have been many experiments with command economies. Soviet Union was one, China was another. Uh, and yes, to some extent, redistribution probably they did manage to do. Unfortunately, these experiments did not uh, succeed. It was actually the Soviet Union was an experiment. Uh, China was an experiment. There are well, there are still some examples of well, Vietnam is there, Cuba is there, uh, North Korea, but North Korea, it's such a closed economy, it's such a closed society, you don't really know what is happening. Vietnam is an autocracy, but at the same time, it is opening up. It is It is not a command economy as such. China gave up the model of command economy in the late 70s, early 80s, when after Mao Zedong died, it was dead shy of being opened up the economy. And inequalities increased. In all of these countries, inequalities loomed after they gave up the command economy model. But the command economy model of China, for example, had many problems. And uh, there were, there was an experiment which was called, what was it called now? I can't remember. Uh, Mao Zedong, there was a time when he.
Are you thinking of the Great Leap Forward or the collective forward?
Yes, Great Leap Forward, where he would say, well, this is how everything has to be done. It was a perfect example of a command economy. It resulted in floods in the country, and it is said that 10 to 13 million people died in famines after that. It's never been quite counted how many people died. So the command economy can have those horrendous problems. So you don't, I don't know whether that is a solution, unfortunately.
I just want to add something that, to what Nalini said. There's a third body day, my favorite, which is called a social democracy. So many of the Scandinavian economies, which were not purely like Soviet Union or China, which were not, purely capitalist driven systems like UK or the USA. So what they started was basically they started taxing people very sort of high tax rate, and they started to put in, and Pulin was talking about public education, public health. And if you look at those countries, Norway, Finland, and so on, so those Scandinavian countries have can be done very can be in different directions. And if you want to look further more, I think Kerala is a good example, right? So I think there are alternative models. You don't have to go to one extreme or the other. And we can find that there are history tells us there are many other examples, but the mixed system, but geared towards public education and public health has done well. And probably that is a sort of alternative that we should explore. That's my perspective.
I'm going to add, actually, I'm taking a very similar position. There will be a few exceptions of authoritarian command rule which have done very well. Singapore is an example, Lee Kuan Yew, and it's done very well. But if you look at authoritarian leaders across the world, vast majority are absolute disasters. They ruin the economy, exploit it. So on balance, it is a mixed economy, a social democracy where people have the ability to throw out the leader if they don't like. That is just crucial, I think, in the long run, because otherwise it's almost like a luck that if you get that one good leader, you do well. Otherwise, it's destructive. It's not worth practicing. What do you want to say something?
Only to concur with yes, in the command economy model, yes, you can expect a closer distribution of not skewed, but a closer distribution of no question about it. But it would restrict individual proclivities in different forms in a way that people would feel sort of constrained. Now, this is given a clear play in an open economy or in a mixed economy, where again income inequalities will emerge and they can get accentuated. But one way to deal with it is in terms of taxation, tax the rich at a very high rate. Kaushik talks about it. Kaushik also mentioned it, and offer advantages by way of education and health and etc. from the bottom end through expenditure. So by combining tax and expenditure policies, you can try to sort of narrow the distribution.
As I want to put in a note to what Pulin just said, the command economy can give you greater equality, but it also need not. There are these horrific crony leaders who have taken control, and it's all been ultimately for them and their profile. So it's full of, yeah, this is an example. What is full of those examples? Once you get a huge control with a few people, you rise even bigger, and the inequality goes through the roof. Yeah. Okay.
Conclusion, merge with a good leader, a command economics work well in distribution.
What?
Merge with a good leader, a command economy should work well in redistributing income.
But if you leave it, the command authority with the leader, once the leader begins to morph into someone evil, you're trapped. So you must have a system of social democracy where a leader can be thrown out by ordinary people not wanting them. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Choice problem. Priyanka has vanished, I think. Oh, Priyanka said, see the difficult situation she's got. So, yeah. Yeah.
I am Rishabh Banerjee from Nalini College, Nalini. So I have two questions. The first question is that we have all heard that a little bit of inflation, perhaps 2 to 3% is good for an economy. So can you all expand on that? And the second question, club together, is that if inflation is such a big deal, can the central bank not combat it by increasing the interest rates on loan or by other open market operations? There must be some other dimensions to it. So, I think.
I can give you, I'm not a specialist in this, the usual view, 2-3% inflation is desirable for the following reason, is that price adjustment downwards does not take place typically. There's a stickiness downwards. So when you want to make adjustments, it's by some prices being raised. So a little bit of inflation allows this flexibility that when there's a shortage, the price will rise. Otherwise, it will remain constant, so on average it rises. About being able to control this inflation through interest rates, that is, you're referring to the Phillips curve, you clearly studied that. You raise the interest rate and you do it, you dampen inflation. Trouble is, most of these monetary policy ideas, it's not a hard engineering problem like I was talking about auctions and things like that. It's not quite clear how it works. Also, if you raise interest rates too high, you crash the economy, you stop the inflation, but you're going to crash the whole economy. That's going to be a bigger problem. So yes, that's roughly what the central bank tries. And one reason why we give autonomy to the central bank is the last thing you want is for politicians to phone the central bank and say, do this, do that, in their political interest. But that is roughly what you're trying to manage along the Phillips curve of the right spot. But it is a science, this part of economics has a lot of noise. So you expect something to happen, something else goes wrong, and the central bank's job is a very, very difficult one.
Sir, I'm Nayak from class 9, School of Education. Sir, we know that in every society, normal rate of inflation occurs, but income rates does not go parallel. Increasing income of people does not go parallelly with them. So, how can these income rates income rates be made in such a way so that it parallelly increases with the rate of the inflation that's occurring in the society? And one more thing, in the world trade, the world trade depends upon the currency of one particular country. This may lead if any country's currency rate decreases with respect to that country's currency, that country can become poorer. And but this will always have a good, it will mostly have a good output on the country whose currency is being used at the world. So can it be that there is a one particular united currency that is used only for the world trade with a stable amount of stable rate with respect to the individual currencies of the world? And why isn't this kind of thing implemented if it is good for the world?
Okay. I'll take the currency bit first. So increasingly, I think
there's not much that so we are moving towards a world where the government doesn't set the what we are talking about the rate across different currencies. Increasingly, we are moving towards the market economy, right? So there's the demand and supply factors that becomes the rate. And if you're talking about historically, it has been the case that US dollar has been used for trade and so on. So obviously, US has a specific advantage because that's basically there's always a demand for their currency, right? So I think you are referring to that, and I don't know whether if I read it correctly, you are also trying to relate it to domestic inflation. So so it's everything has to be in dollar, then the rupee rises or inflation in rupee means that sort of there's price rise in India, and that's going to impact that. So I think they are very real questions. Central banks in emerging markets like economy like ours worry about that. When you say that whether they can control it, because it's all market economy, it's not easy for them to control unless they also begin participate in the market as a buyer or a seller. That's the problem. But that also depends on, imagine you want to buy a lot of dollar. That also depends on your stock of dollar that you have historically built up. So it's a tricky situation for many emerging market economies to control this kind of situation, domestic inflation, and that's why sometimes there are concern about why you want to control inflation, apart from the fact that for international consideration, for trade consideration, for capital inflows outflows consideration, other than the fact that sort of domestic people are suffering because of high. So I think that's a concern that central banks in every emerging market economy are continuously sort of taking into account. What steps they take depends on the reserve that they have sort of accumulated over the years. But that is something that they try to control. And so inflation, kind of trying to control inflation target is part of the reason for that. Setting up to that. It's not just the domestic concerns, but it's also this kind of international concerns where your point I think is very valid. And they try to do it in various ways. They are not always very, very effective, especially if you allow for capital flows, inflows and outflows. But then there have been extreme measures in the past when the government has stopped this kind of inflow and outflow, and that sort of might be the so that what has been tried. So there are these things, but each of them are internationally not very easy to implement because the moment you try to do that, you're impacting international investors and there's a political economic works there. So these are interesting, but all emerging market economies grapple with.
Yeah, ma'am, but what I was talking about is a currency, new currency, because it will help most of the countries in the world if a currency is made. Unlike dollars, it will have a stable rate with respect to their.
Sorry, I forgot to touch on that. Yeah, so the point is new currency, as Kaushik was talking about money. Same thing applies to new currency. I thought a new currency. I call it Indian currency, whatever it is, the international Indian currency. Who is going to start, people have to believe that currency is going to remain stable. So there's this, self-fulfilling kind of a thing that if I believe that currency is going to be stable, I'm going to start buying and purchasing stuff in that currency. That makes it stable. That then the more people believe in that, it's just the point of, like money that was talking about, it's so notional, right? So the moment you float it, there's no answer to it. It's not as if that you're saying that so many goals or so many physical goods are fed to that currency. And the moment you don't do that, it's all people's mind, and that is always inherently a problem with any notional, currency or unit of value, like money. I think that's the inherent problem.
Very briefly, I would say this. The dominant currency right now, of course, is the US dollar. And there was a phase in history when the dominant currency was the British pound sterling. And it's after the First World War, in particular, that dollars slowly emerged. Because the entire 19th century, Britain was leading the trade situation in the entire world, and the pound sterling was the dominant currency. After the First World War, difficulties came about in the British economy, English economy, and US emerges. Now, to answer your question about this alternative currency, in recent years, there's been some, very recent years, there's been some talk of thinking of a BRICS currency or an India trying to have rupee as rupee emerging as something like an alternative currency. But at the end of the day, the strength of that will depend on the strength of the produce of that particular country. The Indian export situation is very poor vis-a-vis the export situation of many of the other countries, including even countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh, which seem to be doing very well in some of the products, for example, textile goods and so forth, where even these two small countries have a much bigger presence in the international export world vis-a-vis India. India a good presence about 15 or 20 years back, but that has gone down. So what I'm trying to say is that the strength of an economy's currency being an accepted world currency depends on how much that particular country has a presence in the entire export market. If you have a very strong presence and if that presence is continuously growing vis-a-vis the presence of the other countries, then there's some chance of your currency becoming a major country, major currency. The US is there because of the predominance of the American sort of presence in the world of technology, industrial goods, and so forth and so on. And it is likely to continue for some period of time. Having an alternative currency will not automatically or immediately lead to that particular currency being accepted. There's been some effort towards that, but it's not really resulted in any success.
Yeah, this is emphasizing the same. It is in many ways very unfair because if your currency is used by the US gets a huge return out of that. But correcting this is in the psychology of billions of people. China would love to replace the world currency with the Chinese currency. But to gain that almost a mystical psychological space is very difficult. And US uses, Pulin was referred to the BRICS initiative. Trump has given an open threat that if BRICS does that, Trump is going to immediately impose tariffs and try to crash that. Because you get a big advantage. One country, the unfairness, it's unfair. But here is the Ecuador, tiny country. I don't know if you know, Ecuador does not have its own currency. It was not being able to manage its inflation. So what the Ecuador government decided to do is to use US dollars. So even for local bazaars, they have no currency of their own, US dollars. How do you think they get these US dollars? Trade, so just by selling goods.
To the US and taking their currency.
Taking their currency. So in fact, it's one-way trade. You have to send your goods to USA, get hold of those pieces of paper. It's not even usual trade. For US, it's massive gains. Ecuador sends goods, US prints notes and sends them to Ecuador. That's it because Ecuador needs it for its own bazaars. So once you get control of a currency in the world which the US has, massive gains, these are called seniorage income to the country. Needs to be corrected, but it's a very, very difficult job. So how do you correct it? It's not here at all.
Sir.
Let them answer.
Okay.
Yeah, and we will be chatting around later so that we solve those.
In policy making, my name is Ariman and I'm from Billabong High, Pulin. In policy making, policies that benefit the nation requires the right people sitting in positions of power. However, reservations which are given based upon the caste system after 10 years of independence, especially at postgraduate programs or promotions, seemingly worsen the process of policy making. So, does the process of providing reservations provide an effect of inequality in an economy?
I can tell you my view and I'll let others speak. I am personally in favor of reservation. Not done crazily, you don't want to disrupt everything. But when you have a history of wrongs, one group being discriminated against, like in India it has happened against certain caste groups, against race in the United States, I believe you do need a lengthy piece of correction. You have to do that carefully, balance it out. But my feeling is a little bit of a cut in GDP if it is happening, because you want to give back a sense of common rights that individuals have that price is worth paying is by you. There are certain things which are normative stands, so there's no question of proving. This is just my view, and that's what I was saying. I don't know. Oh, it's yeah.
No, I agree with Kaushik, but in fact, I have a slightly stronger stand on this, which is that it's not even going to affect your GDP simply because of the fact that historically in our country, and I'm sure about the US also, the income inequality and the social inequality go hand in hand. So the people who are sort of socially not privileged are also the poorest people, and talent does not see whether you're poor. Talent, when it comes, is a totally random event. It doesn't see whether which caste you belong to. And the whole idea of efficiency is that you want to bring up the best talents, irrespective of their caste or money. And because in our country they are mostly correlated, therefore I think reservation policy in the long run may not affect the GDP. Because what you're seeing as efficiency right now is a result of their privileged education. So once you have equal opportunity, which can happen at this point, this kind of bringing up reservation, then I think even that cut that we're talking about probably will not be there. So it has to be, as long as they're correlated.
But if there is a cut, you go with it still.
Yes, because again, if there is a cut, then it is short run vis a long run. So in the sense that it basically, right now there is
Even if it's a long run cut, equality and equal treatment should be a fundamental requirement.
Yes, but that's basically, so that's what I'm saying, that equal opportunity is fundamental and therefore reservation is.
I just want to add one more thing. How do you know how much of talent is being lost because people are not able to access quality education? So you don't know how much is being lost to society that cannot be accounted for. So reservation is absolutely a must.
This model is united.
Whether reservation or no reservation, I think first let me endorse the comment. 60 to 65% of India is not getting the quality education opportunity. So once they get the equal opportunity, I think they can hear equal opportunity and exposure. It's difficult. That's why we're all trying. We should try. So overall, talent will come, number of talents will reach, and India, I hope, then get rid of this stigma of lower income country. Despite of whatever you say, middle wallet, it's a lower income country. 60% or more than 60% of Indians are not being able to contribute productively. There are many other issues, but education is definitely a one. And education is in terms of investment, that's the best, because if I invest today, in 10 years from now, I'll see the results. So the kids who are in the schools today, if we try to give them the best quality education, there are other issues, immediate issues has to be handled. But if I invest in education today, that 60% India will produce more talented, more productive India. And that's the one of the most important critical part of making India really a prosperous.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nisha Reddy, a grade 11 student from Delhi. So, since we were talking about economies earlier, I wanted to ask, so we know that India is a mixed economy, but in our preamble, the word socialist is mentioned. So, how does this relate? I was just curious.
Yeah, go ahead.
But there is no contradiction here. I mean, it's a mixed economy in the sense that there's a private sector and a public sector. And it's a socialism oriented economy in the sense that the notion of capitalism and socialism have to do with a socialist world in which you are concerned about the well-being of the relatively lower bottom end of the population. And if you try to bring that about through social policies, then you are wedded to a kind of socialist ideal while having a mixed economy. So there is no contradiction there. You have a mixed economy, you have generation, so there's a capitalist sector, in which there are firms and corporate sector and so forth, there are earning incomes and so forth, and you could be taxing those entities through corporation tax, personal income tax, and so forth. And you try to bring about a certain kind of uniformity in the income generation finally, of tax income generation. So you can have a mixed economy, one which is geared towards socialist format. There's also a history to it. In the freedom struggle, most of our leaders, Gandhiji, Jawaharlal Nehru, and others, they were attracted. Nehru, in a very strong way, attracted to the ideals of socialism. He was himself a Canadian socialist, and from the time that he was in UK, he was acquainted with the Canadian socialists of England. And this continued to be his sort of lifetime concern and obsession about trying to build India. And India was a colonial country with, which was among the leaders among the colonial countries which gained independence. Nehru gave the stamp of a country which has planning and wedded to a kind of socialist idea. Now, there were certain difficulties with the manner in which we carried forward our planning system and so forth, which led to the license Raj and so forth, and all of which had to be corrected to some extent by Dr. Manmohan Singh and P.V. Narasimha Rao in the early 90s. But that's a longer historical story. But as such, there's, I personally feel that to be having socialism as an ideal and having a mixed economy are very much compatible with each other.
Yeah, unfortunately, secondly, that just one thing I should point out that the word socialist, if by that you mean full control of all production by the state, that is not the sense in which India aspires to it. And if you mean exactly this, that an effort where there is a market economy, but you're also taxing, trying to redistributing, creating a fairer society, a bit like a social democracy, that's the sense in which I would go along with it, and I like to believe that's the way in which we should treat it today in India.
But let's add one more thing. Socialism had many forms. Socialism was not monolith. I mean, it was not the same in all countries. So even at the height of the experiment in China, Soviet Union, Soviet Union to begin with, and then China and the East European countries, they did not follow the same model of socialism. So socialism can have many forms, and India was one form of socialism. It was a mixed economy where there was a private sector and also the public sector, very major public sector. And the preamble, it talks about socialism. I mean, it's more the aspirations towards an equal society, which I think it is important.
So my name is Pratyusha Bajpayee. I am from AGPN Convent and ER School of Grade 8. My question is about inflation. Like today we got to know that inflation affects the poor people, those who are not like having the capacity to pay such to buy their essential products. So I want to ask that how it is beneficial for the consumers. How inflation is beneficial for the consumers. How is it helpful?
Inflation in itself is not really beneficial, but you do want prices to go up and down depending on the shortage of one product and extra availability on another. If these adjustments, relative price adjustments have to take place and prices are sticky downwards, only way you can make relative adjustment is allowing a small amount of inflation. So it's that, and you have to keep in mind that you want, with this inflation, wage is also a payment for labor. So you want that to go up as well. So inflation should not be just prices going up, wages not going up. Then of course, your GDP per capita is falling, and there have been periods when that happens. What's happening in India a little bit, and on this actually I've just begun doing some calculation. The inflation is, GDP is growing in India. But if you look at it carefully, the bottom segment, the way the inflation is spread, vegetable price inflation very high, luxury price inflation not so high, with the result that the bottom segment is being hit negatively, and I wouldn't be surprised if you do a detailed calculation that real GDP growth for people below the, say, the 90% of the population is negative, precisely for the kind of reason that you're saying.
You are absolutely right when you say that inflation could not be helping consumers. 100%. Inflation cannot help the consumers. But inflation will benefit producers, typically, those. And inflation also brings, because we are talking about a general equilibrium system. Inflation brings about, inflation, we are talking about a large number of goods. N goes to very large number. Okay, when you have inflation, it brings about a generation of income process, which can be positive for certain sections of the population. So you have to assess inflation as such hits the consumer. Inflation benefits the producer. Inflation brings about major changes in the income and wage generation process. The totality of it all is one in which a small amount of inflation is regarded to be beneficial for the economy at large, or the economy to be running at a good pace. No development economist would say that we should go for a zero inflation or a negative inflation. Typically, they would all agree that a small amount of inflation is necessary and required for a good pace for the economy to have. That will always benefit a class of producers, it will benefit a class of income and wage earners. So even though it hurts the consumers, the totality of the picture is one in which a small amount of inflation would typically be beneficial.
In one of the articles, it was mentioned, I'm Nurkar Soni from the Lavanya of Girls Kolkata. In one of the articles, it was mentioned that the US government measures inflation rate after removing the prices of vegetables and energy. Why is that?
Sorry, we don't know. So that's the short answer. And again, I feel good that I'm in the company of 3 other people who don't.
Good morning to all and all friends here. I'm Sumaira Khan from South City International School. I'm a teacher of political science. So there was one question for me that if we are a political science teacher, why you are an economics for? But I know my answer right now. There was a question asked by the student here that why the word socialism was incorporated in the Indian Constitution. So I'm just giving her the political angle out of it. It's like just throwing a light on that. Because socialism, that point of time when Indira Gandhi was in our country, she was prime minister, she wanted to incorporate many socialist trends because she wanted to have a society where she would be leading, and she incorporated an idea from Russia. So they wanted a state ownership. That meant she was going through nationalization. So in order to make her measures sound better in the eyes of the public, she introduced the word socialism in the 44th Amendment Act in the Indian Constitution. So that is how the change happened. Because of the word socialism was incorporated, she had to do a lot of she could take a lot of measures in economics. Moreover, we also had a 5-year plan from Russia. We had all these socialist ideas that was incorporated. during that time to change the economy of the country. You also had policy of Garibi Hatao, Garibi Bachao. So that is the reason why the socialism was added to a constitution to give it a very legal idea and aspects of economics. I hope I, because, thank you.
Good, good morning, everyone present over here. I have a question relating to the relationship between economic income inequality and economic growth. So I'd like to ask your personal opinion on this. Is there a trade-off or do they go hand in hand? Because I've heard a lot of mixed opinion about this question. Yes.
You have to wait for my second.
I'm Swara Gopal from Kaushik International.
So I'm going to answer that question precisely in my second session with you guys. But the idea is that old-fashioned way of thinking about these was that there is a trade-off, that if you want to bring in more inequality, then everything is going to take a cut, because personally, the idea was that there's somebody who is getting a lot of initiative, and for inequality, taxing and his incentive is going to go down, and therefore that's how going to be negatively impacted. But increasingly, empirically as well as in terms of your mechanism, we are seeing that that trade-off is really not there. In the sense that modern economies depend more on so equality helps in terms of growth in many different ways. And one of the ways in which more equality helps is precisely again because the production structure is changing. So earlier it was more capital, so machines and so on. Now it's more skill level, and equality brings in a lot of externality. The moment there is externality, you bring together a lot of people, and equality that's going to generate more ideas, more skill formation, and so on. So that old-fashioned trade-off that we used to talk about, I heard it when I was an undergrad student. Now the notions are changing, and people now believe that there is no such trade-off, at least in the modern growth process. But I'm going to talk about, more about it in another session, and maybe we can interact.
So Rishi from Belgaum, Maroon. I had two questions. So I think problem with India would be that the tax rates are as equal to the European countries, I would say 30-35%. But the distribution is the challenge. And one of the articles that I was reading to your previous is that the distribution plan in India for the taxes is not proper. So can you throw some light on that? The other question was that you're talking about Kerala and how lot of money is given to the poor people so that they can eat. But I don't you think that it would lead to all the efficiency of people because when you give them money free of cost, they tend to lose the productivity of
Thanks. Your question is over? Yeah, okay. Now, as regards the tax rate, I think you probably have personal income tax in mind. It is indeed true that our top rate is in the range of about 35%. But if you're thinking in terms of tax rate as in the tax to GDP ratio, in India, the tax to GDP ratio right now is somewhere of the order of about 16 to 17% tax to GDP ratio. European countries, in fact, most of the European countries, when you look at taxation plus the social security payments, they are in the range of 40, 45, or 50%. Particularly when we are thinking in terms of the welfare states like Sweden, Denmark, and so forth. They go up to 45, 50%, where the state has a as large a sort of fraction of GDP as 40, 45, or 50%, whereby they're able to take care of education, health, old age payments, benefits for children to unmarried mothers and things like that. So it's a very large sort of participation in the economic activities that the state undertakes there. In the Indian context, that is simply not possible. We just generate about 16 or 17% of tax as a fraction of GDP. So that is one point that we're considering and keeping in mind. And your second question had to do with something about Kerala. Yeah. Yeah, including GST, we are still under about around 17%. Yeah. Yeah, that is added. In Kerala, it has been again a historical tradition in Kerala where education was brought in by the ruling sort of principalities of Kerala from the beginning of the 20th century. The Travancore, Cochin sort of kings and so forth, they had a very progressive set of educational policies and brought in health facilities for the community at large. And Kerala, of course, within India, was the first country that took on sort of socialist and communist ideas, became the first communist state in the 1950s. Now, and later on as well. Now, there, the idea of giving sort of positive social safety net to the bottom sections of the population was a well accepted political and social sort of idea. So socially and politically, that was well accepted, much ahead of the rest of the country. Much later, I think Bengal also comes into the scene when the CPI came into ruling Bengal. But Kerala was the pioneer. So the commitment to the bottom section of the population was part of the historical and social thinking process of the population.
Yeah, and I'm just adding one thing, what Pulin just pointed out is correct. The tax GDP ratio in India is pretty low by standard, even compared to capitalist countries, fully capitalist countries. Moreover, a lot of the tax is not direct tax, it's GST and things like that, which goes disproportionately to the common person. So if you look at the distributional impact of the tax, in India, it's extremely regressive. Ordinary people paying a disproportionate amount of the tax. And as far as transfer to the poorest people, a certain amount free, I again feel that's fine. If there are people who are so poor in your country, you should give it. And that it could hurt their spirit just getting money for no work. That I don't buy for the following reason. If you think of feudalism period in Britain, where the feudal lords would be sitting back and the serfs would be working. We did not feel bad that the feudal lords are not having to work at all and getting a huge amount of income. So I think for the very poor, providing a certain amount of money so that they come up to that level, I think that is worthwhile just as a humanitarian move, and it's not going to damage institutions by much.
Hi, I'm Rami Shah from the Heritage College of Kolkata. So as we were talking about inflation, there are different type of markets, monopolistic, perfectly competitive. So how does inflation affect on a monopolistic market and on a perfectly competitive market, because both are very opposite to each other? So yeah, so difference between yeah, difference between monopolistic competition and competition. Perfect. My perfect competition is a notion, and you don't really see that sort of, anywhere in the world. It's kind of it's a framework as a benchmark. And to my mind, monopolistic competition is different only to the extent that, as in perfect competition, by the way, remember that there's nobody is earning any profit at all, any supernormal profit. So basically, that basically means that everybody is getting back. So people who are working there, either as a worker or as a landowner and all, they are getting everything. Monopolistic competition to function as it creates a slight scope for profit, but that also often sort of, it's basically that creates a different kind of competition across different groups. But ultimately, that probably is closer home in some societies. You do find competition in the form of different variety of goods.
where they're earning a very notional profit, but it's not real profit and so on. Otherwise, that's the best thing that we have come up with in some markets. We do find real life examples of monopolistic competition. There's in some markets where there is a variety of goods, maybe the market for toothpaste or something like that. But corporate competition is just a benchmark to see what would have happened if everything goes back to the factors. But really, there is no real life example where that is the context. So it's really a framework to look at as a benchmark to compare it with the real context. So this slide.
Good morning. My name is Ashwini Kaya and I am from Billabong High Malad. So my question is a bit different because I want to talk about the global community and the difference between developed and developing nations. As you know, we have really influential international organizations such as the World Bank itself. But to my knowledge, in the World Bank, where resolutions are made, the voting doesn't happen on an equal basis. It happens according to voting powers of different countries. Besides, I think the voting powers, the future voting powers are with the developed countries. Don't you think practices like this in international organizations prove to be a big disadvantage for developing countries on which any resolution will have a way bigger economic impact than the developed countries?
Yeah, I can tell you, yeah, well, yeah, uh, the World Bank and IMF, about 18% of the vote is cast alone by United States. Japan, 10%. Take European countries together, it's a majority. So Africa, Latin America, Asia, they can all be against a particular decision. If United States and a small group of rich countries decide because of the voting lopsidedness, they'll get it through. So that you're right. And I think it's very wrong. And people very often will justify, and the ground that was given when the Bretton Woods conference took place and the initial draft was being made, is that countries that give more money will get a bigger share of the vote. That's the way they were brought in. But to me, yes, we may have started with that, but in the long run, that's not justified. I work for the World Bank, but I think it's wrong. And the reason I would give is, if in the United States, you said that Elon Musk, he will probably very soon anyway have a disproportionate amount of the effective vote. But you say he's rich, he'll get extra vote. Bill Gates will have extra vote. You're going to have a very, very unfair society. So I fully agree with you that this needs to be corrected. When I was there, even otherwise I argue, but you know, the world has its power, lobbies and all, it's very difficult to make a correction.
Sir, I'm Soham from of class 9 from Physical Education. I have a few questions, but a thought ran over my mind on the quality of health and education. That why not make a rule that the ministers and the government officials have to send their children in the government schools and means they have to take treatment in the government hospitals. So means it can make the government hospitals also better for treatment and accountability.
I fully agree with you. But I don't know how to do it. You should do exactly that.
A lot of the treatment of the government, this of senior government officials, of the politicians in Delhi. I've been all my life in Delhi. I know what happens, something of what happens there. They all go to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And they get treatment over there. But even there's a hierarchy. So it's not equal treatment for everyone. So whether that will solve the problem, I hope not.
No, I just want to add that that's a great idea in principle, and if one can think about it, because part of the problem, I've been looking at the health and education sector for quite some time now, ever since the scenario started changing, and it is true that because this influential government officials are opting for private healthcare and education for their children, the public institutions are going down even more because there's more onus on the part of the policymakers to make the better. So I think it's a great idea. But like any other ideas, there is going to be some challenges and resistance. So how to tackle that political economy is not something I'm sure about, but it's actually
The public universities, the private universities in India are a very recent phenomenon. So everyone, all of us went to public universities and got the same education as anyone else. So the private universities have come up for in the last 20 years at least, not more than that. And the inequality has increased.
From CMDPS University, Kolkata. I have a quick question. Could you please elaborate on the role of the Cold War and specifically the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan played in establishing the US hegemony between
I can just say a little bit. Very difficult to bring out like what causes it. You know, the drift of global power over time. There are initial moves, but then you have to ask that why did even that initial move happen? So it is very difficult to pin down that true. And China is trying to occupy a space which is very similar to what the United States has got. And a couple of correct moves in the beginning done by leaders who are very far-sighted. I know data periods which have studied Cuban Missile Crisis. You see the tension between Russia and United States. One kind of thing which is not exactly what you're saying. One reason why the US came out very strongly out of it also, I believe, that point of time, intellectual investment done by the United States, biggest thinkers being brought in working with Kennedy, gives it an power. Bretton Woods conference taking place in 1944. United States is gradually taking power away from Europe into its own hands. But then again, you have to ask a question, how did that happen? What happened earlier? In the end, these are long deterministic processes through which some country comes up and the others don't. That's really all I would even
Only to say that the Second World War, devastated a lot of Europe also, and of course the rest of the world was also affected by it. So the country that emerged unquestionably in terms of economic power was the US of A. And it sort of the Marshall Plan was started to divert funds from the US to rebuild the European economies and so forth. So that also came, in addition to passing these large sums of money, it also brought in some amount of political power that became newly vested in the US of A. So yes, this is a political economy problem, and also a historical sort of. We have to understand it in its historical dimension. And the other question was about the Cold War. This is a sort of political economy situation where there were two blocks, the capitalist bloc and communist bloc, and that even though there was no direct war happening, though in fact there were a number of side wars that were going on, for example, later on Vietnam and so forth. But there was a Cold War situation rather than the two world wars, one and two. Rather than those, the animosity was showing up in terms of taking sort of aggressive positions between the two parties, and the Cuban Missile Crisis was one particular instance in the early 60s when Kennedy was the president of the US. So yes, it was all part of a historical sort of process by which the US was emerging and continued to sort of project itself as the topmost political economic power.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rishiyat Datta from the Heritage in Kolkata.
In recently an article that I read, it said that India currently holds the position for the most populated country in the world with an estimated 1.4 billion people. On top of that, it also boasts the highest birth rate in the world. So going back on the topic of inflation that we were discussing a few moments ago, I wanted to know what role population plays in the economic growth of a country in terms of its inflation. Like how does a higher or a lower population negatively or positively impact the economy of a country?
I don't think India has among the highest birth rate or population growth rate in India has gone down quite a bit. There are other countries that are growing faster. But between population growth and inflation, I don't see the two broad phenomena, one opposing the other, one fixing the other, I don't see. Yeah.
No, I think the inflation, so there is a part of the question, inflation is more a short-term thing. So population of people who are being born today will join the workforce maybe whatever 20 years down the line, and then they start demanding growth, they learn something. So the inflation is a current phenomenon. So I don't think that probably it is the connection is not direct. But I think that the other part of the question was about how population growth impacts growth rate. That the answer is sort of depends on whether you're able to employ these newly, born people when they become young, join the workforce, whether you can gainfully employ them or not. So the crucial question, therefore, is that will they be able to join the workforce and will they be able to contribute in terms of productivity? And that's why it becomes the answer becomes very murky. Traditionally, we used to think that okay, they'll find some work and they'll contribute to the output. Increasingly, especially in countries like ours, given the kind of unemployment or desired unemployment that we do have, a higher population do not necessarily translate into higher output. And that's exactly what, and that's what we have been talking since morning. That's exactly where skilling these people in the right direction becomes important, not just the population.
I'm Arithro from grade 9 from Philips. So my question is like India, the money is actually concentrated in the hands of some people, and the majority of them are in the poor section. So I have the question like unemployment is a major cause of that, and due to that, a lot of people are migrating from India to different countries that is causing brain drain. So how can we what are the ways, or how can we create this, distribute the money not only in some hands but in all over India, and that can resolve the problem of unemployment?
I mean, my view is that, and this has come up several times, India's taxation system is very, very lopsided. The redistribution that should happen through taxation, even in a highly capitalist country like the United States, I think there's more in distribution. No idea what it should be, but more than what's happening in India. So there ought to be. And to me, the biggest problem is the inequality at birth, which is very, very high in India. That needs to be corrected. So that, and then the other kinds of things that we are talking about, providing education. Nalini pointed out the early Chinese experiment, lots of wrong things also did, but spending education across the board in the country gives huge benefits and also contributes to distribution. So those are the things that it's not easy. We have done poorly. We have to recognize that and then build up pressure. India needs to have much greater equality through all these measures.
It's an aspiration to migrate abroad. We talked about migration. But countries out there, they're not very keen to take in such large numbers of people. So that leads to a situation where there are a lot of illegal migration out, and a lot of tragic tales of Indians caught in a terrible situation in the borders of Mexico or the US, Canada, and so forth and so on. So it's a very limited way to think in terms of solving the crucial economic problem that we have. The problem ultimately has to be solved the shores, within the shores of India. And for that, one is to generate jobs here and so forth. And that's the best way we can try to address the problem. But till such time as the disparities exist, till such time as there is explicit unemployment and a young person unable to find a job here, which is indeed the case. That is why he or she is taking in terms of trying to migrate out. It's a terrible situation, but it will take a long time for us to think in terms of generating the right kinds of jobs to absorb the people within our job market. So it's a long process. I think the brain drain is not too high. That's my own personal view. There are some people trying to migrate out, whether it is the typical brain drain. In the 50s and 60s, 70s, we were thinking about brain drain with high profile scientists and engineers, doctors moving out. A lot of the out migration has been of people from India, not necessarily of this type. There have been a class of farmers. So, I'm talking about the out migration countries like the Middle East and so forth. So there's a variety of sort of characteristics of people migrating out. Not all of whom should be brought in under the brain drain kind of category. Certainly, the higher incomes abroad is a big sort of attraction for people in India without a job who want to work. But there is a problem from the other countries' point of view, particularly Europe, North America. They want to restrict the people migrating out. It's a political economy problem, and, and the world that it will take a long time.
Do you think that this issue is like for this the population of India is responsible, or is it really?
But the population certainly is in the sense that we have a huge population and the number of available sort of proper jobs for the population is very limited. More than 90% of the population lives under a very low level of income, something like 10 to 15,000 rupees per month is the monthly take home for a large section of the informal sort of workers in the country. And the high wage earners, people from Felix and other well positioned schools in Calcutta and Pune and so forth, can aspire to get excellent jobs after your BA and which is a great thing. But for the large masses of people of this country, they can only think in terms of the best they can think of is something like 15 to 20,000 rupees max as a per month salary. So there is a great divide between the, shall we say, the bottom 80 or 90% of the population, top 5 to 10% of the population. And this such a situation exists. There are bottom ones definitely wanting to quickly try to migrate out. They can, if they possibly can, in search of finding. It's a natural process.
One more thing about brain drain, what that has done, it's such a complicated relationship. One reason why in the mid 1990s, India's services sector took off was indirectly the brain drain. The large number of Indians in Silicon Valley, shipping work back to Bangalore. And Bangalore had a transformative period because of the brain drain. So it's a complicated global.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Angela from the Heritage College, Kolkata. We're talking about like the inequality in self-education a few moments ago. I was people say that the level of the public competitive exams in India, and also globally agreed that it is quite very difficult. It's quite difficult to pass and to get very good grades in it. So, and it's a big deal to get into government colleges and universities to pursue higher, like for medical or engineering, and it's a very big deal. In fact, it's a very
quick thing. But then I just want to ask that if that is the case, if the government colleges and if seats in the government colleges and universities are so much in demand and such a huge achievement, then why is the level of education in government schools so low? Like there's lack of teachers and new technologies and like several even the basic amenities are not there and there are proper no management like the management is quite low. Why is that? Like why do if just I mean when we pass out of school, we immediately go to colleges for higher education. So if the level of education in schools are like this, then how isn't there a huge inequality and just a few like grades difference and such? Thank you.
Much more money into that. Okay, so there's much more money.
Uh, I think there has been also been talked about this, how she had the best of teachers in government schools when she was in Purulia as a child. Now, I know there was a generation, uh, even before that, they were all educated in government schools and got a very good education. Over time, uh, as private schools came up, there was, say in Delhi, I went to a private school. Now, this was in the 50s and 60s. I'm very old. So, the- by that time, when I was a child, schools in Delhi were already, there was this, hierarchy which was developing. We were all sent to private schools. And over time, what has happened is that the government schools were neglected. Uh, and it became, there became a class difference with uh, people of lower income being sent to the government schools, people who couldn't afford the private schools. Uh, when we were in college, the universities, there were no private universities, all of us went to public universities, the universities were very good. And we got a good education in public universities. Now, for the future, I would say that it's there has to be a focus on providing good schools by the government. And that would involve not only putting in money in infrastructure and providing good facilities in the government schools, but also uh, training teachers. I think we have to focus on training primary school teachers because teacher training programs have to improve. We have to really focus on providing, uh, trained teachers with a commitment to education. And those teachers should be hired in the government schools. So also give good salaries to teachers in government schools. If there are good teachers, there's good infrastructure, I don't see any reason why the people will not opt for those schools.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kashika Singh, and I'm from Billabong High Manar. So, my question is with reference to the recent tax reform. So, how is it that in so many countries, for example, Saudi Arabia, there are no tax, there is no income tax, but only a business-related tax, is better developed than our country where we have so many taxes and every working person is paying tax.
They're much better placed because of their oil reserves. They're very lucky in relation to the population. of those countries, they are very fortunate to have extremely high levels of oil, which gives them this income advantage right now. So for a good number of years, they'll be able to not have any kind of income tax and so forth, and yet be able to develop themselves. It's a fortuitous.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Tisha Agarwal from South City International School, Calcutta. So, sir, you mentioned about developing countries. So, sir, these developing countries take a lot of debt. So, sir, how can these developing countries tackle their rising debt level along with inflation? Because, like in USA, they have more than $20 trillion of debt, and because of the in-house debt, it's also affecting the World Trade Organization because everything is evaluated on the basis of dollars, like the in-house currency. So, how do these developing countries tackle the increasing debt levels?
You know, by the way, after the Great Recession, the highest debt to GDP countries were some of the European countries. That happened for very complex reasons. I think the interest rates were too low for a very long period, 7, 8 years, and the debt GDP ratio built up in a very big way. Then, even for advanced economies like Greece, there were big worries, Greece, Ireland, that they would crash because the debt was very large. For developing countries, when debt builds up, even if it's not that high, it is indeed, you're right, it's a worry. But once you've got into that debt situation, what you do, the whole purpose of an organization like the International Monetary Fund is to try to steer a slow course so that the debt comes down slowly instead of a crash taking place. But nevertheless, there are, of course, lots of instances of countries which crash altogether because of their debts.
So we'll take the last question.
Yes.
First of all, good afternoon, professors. My name is Arpan Majumdar. I'm from Standard 9, and I have a question. I just want to know the role of rural economy in economic development.
Dual or rural?
You know, dual economy, it's a notional characterization. Do you know who did the first work on dual economy? Do you know the name by any chance? Arthur Lewis.
Yes.
Yeah, you probably know that's why I'm asking. And it's a very interesting history. Arthur Lewis was puzzled about the nature of developing countries because himself he had worked in Ghana, is from West Indies, so he knows a little bit about poor countries. What he would notice is that poor countries, there's one small segment which is just like in a rich country. Go to a big city, it functions like a rich economy, but vast regions are different. And in fact, I know the history, which is very interesting. He was making a walk in Bangkok when it suddenly struck him that developing countries should be not treated as totally different but dual. One segment like rich countries, the rest very different. And he wrote up this paper in 1954, which became a classic. So the dual economy is really a strange amalgam of an advanced economy in one segment and a primitive economy elsewhere. And then some of the tensions and the difficulties that arise from these two is the paradigm under which we still continue to do a lot of our work.
Good afternoon, sir. Thanks to Felix Inspiration Circle Management that they give this platform. Now, I want to ask one question. I don't know how will you take it. Very question is, at the end, the money goes to a group of rich people or community. How to reduce this disparity? This is first. Second is, and as you told on 20th, what will happen in the country if Mr. Trump increase the negotiation between different countries about that labor country or the digital whatever they are doing. Then don't you think that it is against the ethos of that country? Because you talk so many things about philosophy, ethos, about sociology, about morality, about social engineering, about philosophy. Sir, please.
Short answer is yes. It is, as you're virtually saying, it is the ethos of the country that does it. So, answer that to that, the answer is yes. And to the first part, that money goes into few pockets. That's what we've been stressing throughout here. That you do need to address it. Don't just look at the GDP and celebrate that the whole GDP is growing. You have to look at where the GDP is going. So on that, we are completely on the same page. Yes.
So, the question answer session has been very vibrant, very active. So actually, I have been very active, starting from here to there, and not being able to please everyone because I think there are some overlapping questions also. So after this, I think I'll request the teachers of specific schools to take their children down for lunch. But we shall be back at 3 for a session with Professor Mausumi Das. So we would expect you to come back after lunch to the same classroom. And could we please request the students who haven't registered yet to register in the right-hand corner desk at the back, because unless all of you register, we cannot form the groups. So we need to form the groups for your presentation and reflection. So students who haven't registered yet, kindly register. I would request our teachers, please teachers, to kindly help them in registering. Thank you. We will see all of you at 3.